listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
For one more week, I'm Mike Ghostface Pickle.
And I'm James Ghostface Rivera. Today we will be reviewing the brand new Scream 2022. Scream or Scream 5, depending on your perspective, but I'm ready to get into it. Excited. Following up our breakdown of the franchise last week.
Yeah, so after another 11 years, we get another sequel. This one's just called Scream, just 2022, like you said. Directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. They were the directors of Ready or Not last year. And the writer's James Vanderbilt. James Vanderbilt wrote Darkness Falls. It's a good movie. The Rundown, a good action movie with The Rock. Zodiac. We all know that's an awesome movie.
Oh, yeah.
The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, okay, but he also wrote Murder Mystery with Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. And just based on this guy's writing, I watched that last night, Murder Mystery. It's actually pretty damn good.
It sounds like his his body of work sounds really all over the place, ranging from really goofy films to like straight out masterpieces like Zodiac.
Yeah,
it's pretty fascinating.
And Murder Mystery was surprisingly good. The dialogue was really snappy. It was good for a silly Adam Sandler movie, and I guess they're already doing a part 2 with the same writer. So
how current is this movie?
It was just last year on Netflix, because Adam Sandler's a Netflix darling, so they just keep letting them crank out movies. But this one was pretty good.
Cool.
The other writer on this one is Guy Busick. He wrote this really good show called Stand Against Evil. He also wrote Ready or Not from these two directors. And he did a bunch of episodes of Castle Rock, and he's going to be writing the upcoming Final Destination 6.
Should be interesting.
So really good writers and a pretty damn good script, I thought. So with this Scream, of course, Neve Campbell's returning as Sydney. Courtney Cox as Gail. David Arquette as Dewey. Marley Shelton returns as Deputy Judy. She's Sheriff Judy now. And Roger Jackson returns as Ghostface. And believe it or not, Skeet Ulrich returns as Billy Loomis. So
one thing I want to say before any of the listener proceeds, I mean, we always give spoilers because it's part of what we do here on the show to go in depth. But if this movie is new, there's no way we can get into the depth of the themes of this movie and what it's about and really tackle it without spoilers. So just to let you know, we are going to be getting into the details of the film. So if that's not your thing, go watch the movie and then come back here, because we can't do it any other way.
Yeah, it's really hard to discuss any of the Scream movies without spoilers.
Yeah.
Because all the best things about the movies contain spoilers.
Yeah.
So this had a really good, fresh new cast led by Melissa Barrera. She's a Mexican actress from In the Heights. That's when she really hit big. But she was a Mexican actress. She did a bunch of Mexican TV and movies before she did Scream.
So I wanted to say I'm actually very familiar with her because of the show Vida on Starz. She was one of the two lead actresses in it, and I loved her on that show. I thought it was I really like that show a lot. It takes place in Boyle Heights. You rarely get that kind of representation of the Mexican American community on television. So I was really excited when I found out that she was going to be the lead of this Scream film. Always liked her. She's beautiful too.
Yes, just more Latinos and Latinas in mainstream movies like this. Mm-hmm. Please, because there's a whole talent pool that we aren't dipping into.
Yeah.
In the Latino market. So that she plays Sam Carpenter. She's a star of the film. And Jenna Ortega, she's from Jane the Virgin. She played young Jane in Jane the Virgin. She was also in The Babysitter 2. And she's the star of 2 upcoming pretty big horror films. X from Ty West, she's the main star of that one. And she's also a main star of Studio 666, the Foo Fighters horror film. So she's blasting onto the horror scene, dude. and she plays Tara Carpenter. She's a sister of Sam. And then we have Dylan Minnett. He's the guy from Let Me In, and he was the goofy looking kid from Don't Breathe. He plays Wes Hicks. He's the son of Sheriff Judy. Jack Quaid. He's from Hunger Games, and he's also Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid's son. He plays Richie. He's the boyfriend / simp of Sam.
I didn't know that was Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid's kid.
Yeah, I didn't either until I looked it up. Yeah.
Okay.
She's a sister of Sam, and then Mickey Madison. She's from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She plays that crazy little brunette that goes nuts, and she plays Amber Freeman. She's Sam's BFF. Jasmine Savoy Brown. She was in The Leftovers and Yellow Jacket. She plays Mindy Meeks Martin. She's Randy's niece, and then Randy's nephew is played by Mason Gooding. He's Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son, and he was in Booksmart. Really good movie, Booksmart, if you guys haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah, real good.
So Mason Gooding actually wrote an essay on Scream at school when he went to NYU. So he told the directors about that during the casting process, so he got hired.
There seems to be a lot of the children of Hollywood in this movie then.
Yeah. So the synopsis of this one: 25 years after the original murders in Woodsboro, a new Ghostface starts killing again, prompting Sidney to return to uncover the truth. The cinematographer on this one was Brett Jukowicz. He did the cinematography on Ready or Not, and he did the cinematography in the upcoming film The Black Phone with Ethan Hawke. Really looking forward to that one. This one is typical Scream fashion. It opens up with a great opening scene, but for me it was enough like the first that you're forced to compare it, and it doesn't quite hold up as well, but it's competent as hell. I don't think you could do it any better than it's done.
It's inevitable, given what the movie is, that it's kind of a repeat, and it becomes very clear as the movie goes on. It has to kind of be that, though I will say, of the 5 Scream openings, it's probably down there. I think I prefer the opening of 1, 2, and 4 to this, and it's about as good as the opening of 3, more or less. I think I might prefer it slightly to the third opening. I mean, they're all great opening sequences, but this is, for me, not the best one, but still really solid.
Well, this is our first big spoiler alert. She also actually survives the attack, so it's the first victim of the opening scene to actually survive the attack.
And I gotta say, that caught me off guard when they said that she survived, because that was a brutal fucking attack. There's nothing about it in the way that it's filmed, and the way the brutality of it, the way her leg breaks. And I have to say, she fights back a lot harder than some of the other victims in these Scream movies. Like, she's really punching and going for it. And I think what results is a more brutal Ghostface who has to go down harder on his victims, because they're not weaklings anymore and they don't just sit around waiting for it to happen. She puts up a hell of a fight in this one, and damn, kind of impressive.
Yeah, the attacks and the kills are mean and gory, and even though she survived, like you said, it was really graphic.
Yeah.
But what I liked about that opening scene, and what I think they did well, is you can't mimic the first one, which is Ghostface starts out, the voice isn't menacing.
Mm-hmm.
It starts slowly growing more menacing. And then now you can't do that anymore, because just hearing his voice, it's immediately menacing, no matter what he says. Mm-hmm. So what they did is that they had Roger Jackson kind of change his voice a little bit, and he was talking a little normal, like he almost didn't sound like Ghostface. So he kind of changed his voice a little bit, and then that kind of helped kind of transition into the more sinister Ghostface later in the conversation. I thought that helped that scene out a lot.
Quite a bit. And it's the first time since the original where Ghostface doesn't get on the phone right away and start menacing the victims and like, what's your favorite, the classic, what's your favorite movie? I really like how he leads her on, and he makes it sound like he's just what he said, he's part of like an AA or NA meeting or something like that, and he's talking about the importance of group meetings, like he knows his sister, and he goes on a long time before they even start spilling over into horror movie conversation.
Yeah. And overall the movie just looks really good. All the kills are really good. The script and all the meta commentary on requels and elevated horror and Lego sequels, all that's good in this. The killer, and I've heard some complaints about this. The killer reveal is predictable, but if you really think about it, no matter who ended up being the killer, you could go back and say that it was predictable, that you knew it, because this script does really well at planting the seed that anybody could really be the killer. And I think it's because they actually produced multiple scripts while filming this movie, so nobody in the movie knew who the killer was. None of the cast knew. None of the cast knew how it was actually going to play out, because they did so many different scenarios to avoid spoilers being leaked.
I mean, as far as the predictability goes, I've seen somebody point this out online, and I kind of agree with it. I kind of predicted one of the killers. It was pretty obvious to me. The other one, I wasn't so sure. But part of the fun of the reveal of the killers in the Scream movies, yes, it's the finding out who the killer is, but I think the bigger fun in a lot of these Scream movies is what the motivation is and what the reason is. And I think that is just as much a part of the mystery, if not more so, than who the killer is. Because, yeah, we could predict it, but the motives are always very interesting. They always seem to tie into whatever time the Scream movie was made. That's one thing about the genre, about every Scream movie. They all exist within the parameters of whatever the current horror trend is, whatever the current fan trends are, and whatever pop culture is at the moment, and whatever the conversation, with kind of like tapping into the zeitgeist of the moment. And I found the motivation of this one pretty interesting. Maybe the killers were one of them was predictable for me, the other one I had a hard time, but I don't really think that takes away from the tension of the movie.
Well, did you guess the male killer, or did you guess the female killer?
The male killer.
See, I guessed the female killer right from the beginning, but not because of anything in the movie, just because of the casting, just because of who it was.
Madison Girl.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have a lot to say about that when we get there. I'm pretty sure that was the ending of this is overtly referencing and homaging Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where I thought it was obvious, and then they add one more scene at the end just to make sure, just in case you didn't know, we're doing our little Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moment right here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got that off of it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And hand sanitizer being involved, so it calls back to our whole pandemic thing, and that's what actually delayed the whole movie.
Yeah. But yeah, so I predicted the male killer, but not the female killer. The friend I went to go see it with was the opposite, was like you, predicted the female killer, but not the male killer.
Yeah, and I guess part of me does suspend disbelief when I'm watching these things, so I don't allow myself to dedicate to one certain killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't dedicate myself to a guess while I'm watching.
And what I found interesting about this one with trying to like predict who the killer is, some of these conversations are so strange and so awkward that I was thinking was like, why does everybody in this movie, all these kids, they talk like they're the killer? Like that awkward conversation with Randy's niece.
Yeah.
in the basement when they're getting beer. I couldn't tell if those two girls were like winking at each other like we're both the killers, if one of them was the killers and one was just messing around, or if they were about to make out, or there was sexual tension going on there. There was like 4 or 5 scenarios going through my head. I was like, what's going on with this conversation? I can't tell if they kill each other or fuck each other right now.
No, I did, it was late in the game, but I did guess who the male killer was, but only after he came in the house. And it's this guy, he objected to stopping at the house, right, to get the inhaler. And he insisted on not stopping. And then when they finally stop, he goes down to the basement to get a beer. So that's when I knew, okay, either this is a flaw, it doesn't make any sense that this guy will be going downstairs, or he's a killer.
Yeah. But I really liked the whole new cast of this movie. And I did something interesting. I kind of wanted to go back after, and I watched Scream 4 again after watching this to get a comparison between the two. because they both serve kind of similar functions and approach it in a different way. They're both reboots, basically. They're both attempts to reboot the franchise. They both came 11 years before the last entry, and they both seem to like capitalize on a new generation. Scream 4 is kind of like the millennial Scream. This one is like the Gen Z Scream. And I found the way that they approach the reboot requel aspects of each film kind of interesting, because they both kind of function the same way, but they do something totally different with it. What I found interesting about Scream 4, it's, and they talk about this, where how a lot of these requels, like Halloween 2018 is probably the prime example of what these are. This new trend that's going on in it, and it makes a lot of sense. After a while, you know how the studios kept making remake after remake after remake, and it just, they were not catching on. At first, they were a little bit successful, which is why the craze started, but it never satisfied fans. It always pissed people off, and they can never really get them right. They mention in the movie stuff like Child's Play and Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. None of them ever really work. At the same time, doing like Halloween at Part 12 sounds ridiculous, and that sounds even in some ways even more absurd than a sequel. So they found the clever way to give these franchises these little soft reboots where they kind of restart it with a new scenario years later that makes the franchise feel like it picks up fresh, while it's still existing within the framework of the original and kind of honoring the legacy of the originals, bringing those characters in while kind of injecting new blood. Scream 4 and 5 both do this, and I think the biggest difference between Scream 4 and Scream 5, Scream 4 is a requel that ends up being a fake out. It introduces all these new characters, gives you the legacy characters, and it kind of makes you feel like they're passing the torch to Jill, which would have been Sydney's nephew. And then it kind of upends it by having her be the killer and then killing off the whole cast and leaving nothing but the legacy characters there. So it's almost like a psych out, like psych, you thought that this was going to be a prequel, but it's not. She even says that at the end. You know what they say about remakes, don't fuck with the original, kind of like, you know, committing to that. This one goes full on with the requel thing and commits to its new characters and pushes the legacy characters a little bit, not a little bit more, quite a bit more to the sidelines than they've ever been in any of these films. But I think it kind of works. If you're going to do the requel, the reboot, whatever you want to call these damn things, it was a very fresh and interesting way to approach it. One that pretends to be a requel and is just a sequel, and one that fully commits to it and feels like it's rebooting the franchise for a new generation and with a new cast of characters.
Yeah, it's really interesting to compare this one compare 4 and 5, because for this not being Wes Craven or Kevin Williamson, they got pretty close to the magic of what Scream is. But I just think 4, it just had just Wes Craven has the edge on the suspense scenes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the suspense was really good in this. The violence was really good. The kills were good. But just Wes Craven has that edge, just make you feel the suspense a little more. And he also has the edge on the violence. I said that last week where Wes Craven, he's so good at filming violence. He makes you feel it. Even if the kills don't end up being as gory, you still feel them hit harder. So the kills in this one in Part 5 were decidedly, you know, mean and brutal, but I didn't feel most of them as much as I did with Wes Craven.
I could see what you mean. I have a hard time saying, like, I'd have to see this one again, but it's roughly, I'd say, about as gory as Scream 4. I wouldn't say it's more or less about the same, but maybe Scream 4, it feels a little bit more violent. But at the same time, I hear a lot of people saying that nobody can. Obviously, we know nobody's going to replace Wes Craven. I think these guys did more than a competent job. People, I keep hearing, oh, they're competent. They do a good enough job. It's like, no, they do a really damn good job. I think they really excel. Obviously, nobody's ever going to be Wes Craven, but I think that they're worthy of being directors of this franchise, and they get it. And if they do more, which I suspect they will do, I can only see them improving from here on out. But I don't know. I thought this was magnificently suspenseful. The jump scares got me. I felt on the edge of my seat. I was very devastated with 2 characters. They fucked me up with one character, which was bad enough, and then what they did to another one. I'm okay. Can we get into the spoilers now?
Yeah.
Okay. Dewey dies in this movie. My God. And I remember I've been watching Scream since I was a little kid. I remember watching this as a kid, and I grew up watching every Scream movie and like keeping along and keeping track. With Sydney, Gale, and Dewey, these kind of felt like people that you knew because I followed them throughout so much of my life. Dewey's death felt like I was seeing somebody die who I grew up watching. Really broke my heart and it had me teared up. And I think Courtney Cox's reaction as Gale Weathers is what really sold it to me. Her
Yeah.
devastation of it. Oh man, that was heartbreaking. It was probably one of the most heartbreaking moments I've ever had in a horror film was seeing Dewey die. And I knew it was happening, and I was in denial while it was happening, but I knew it was happening. I had so many mix of emotions. I was pissed off. I also felt it was very appropriate and right for the story, and it was time. So many mixed emotions, but I feel like the movie earned it.
Well, some people have been saying that for such a legacy character that we've been following through the whole franchise, that he didn't get enough of a death.
Oh,
That he didn't put up enough of a fight. But I thought that initial fight before he went back, he beat Ghostface ass and shot the shit out of him, you know?
mm-hmm.
So, and then, but I'm kind of disappointed in Dewey because he shoots him twice. First of all, doesn't do the headshot, and then gives Ghostface way too much time before he goes back and kind of lumbers over to finish him off and gets his ass stabbed.
I get that, but at the same time, is it not consistent with Dewey's actions through this entire franchise? I know
Definitely,
it's disappointing. I was like, that's always kind of been Dewey, though. I mean, we look at it what he does in Scream 2 and in Scream 3 in particular. At the end, we're like, head Dewey, head. And I was thinking to myself in Scream 3, I was like, fucking Dewey, you should I don't why does Nev Campbell have to scream at you, shoot the head? Why? I don't know. You would think he would have learned from that, having gone through this scenario 4 times already, which is a ridiculous amount of time. Although I'd have to feel, if I were these characters, I would feel like this is a cosmic joke. How the fuck does this keep happening? People keep coming,
yeah.
imitating and recreating these murders over and over again. But yeah, I get what you mean, but I still feel it was consistent, and I feel like they gave this version of Dewey kind of like a good little arc. You see him a little bit more broken, a little bit more destroyed. It's a much different reboot than Scream 4, because Scream 4, when we come back to Gale and Dewey, we see them I wouldn't say in marital bliss. They're still having little problems, but it seems nice. They're still together and everything. He wakes up and she's in the bed. Here, it's a total opposite. He's a broken man. He's sitting in a trailer. He's by himself. He's watching Gale on the news. I was a little bit disappointed at first, but the more I started thinking about it, I was like, it makes sense from a storytelling vantage point. Their relationship throughout the entire series has always been rocky and on and off. They're together, they're not together, and somewhat like their relationship in real life.
Yeah, exactly. It mirrors a lot of what happened between them in real life.
Yeah, and of course they met on the Scream set, but I think he was probably the best used legacy character, even though it was premature, and he felt the one that to me was most vital to the story. And he came across as particularly heroic in this one, going back to do something that he knew was foolish, not just going back at the last moment to try to get the killer, just inserting himself into the situation when he didn't need to, because he knows it's the right thing to do. Kind of gave him a really good emotional story arc. And I'm sad. I'm really fucked up. That really fucked me up. But
well,
I think
you're right. His dumb mistake that caused his death was indicative of how Dewey acts and his decisions throughout the thing. But what's great about it is the initial fight before that was uncharacteristically great for Dewey.
That's true. They gave him a good, and he definitely came across as a very brave, good-hearted man in this one. So,
but
I'm happy.
I'm pretty sure she'll return in the upcoming sequels, but I think Kirby should have returned, Hayden Panettiere, because if you notice, Richie is looking at YouTube and he sees a thumbnail on there that says "Interview with Woodsboro survivor Kirby Reed." So I'm figuring she must be in the next one.
The way that I look at it is, this is the reboot, and it seems like this is going to go forward because Scream 4 was meant to be a reboot. However, it was not really successful at the time. this has had much better financial success out the gate than Scream 4 ever had. Also, I think Scream 4 was a little ahead of its time, and it tapped into some things that were not quite full flower yet. I don't think the relevancy of Scream doesn't grow until 5 or 6 years after that movie, if that makes sense. It kind of was predicting certain trends a little ahead of this time, whereas this one is more directly plugged into now. It doesn't feel like it's predicting anything. It feels like it's reveling in the moment a little bit more.
Yeah, because since we're talking about it, I'll go ahead and cover the box office real quick. So far, this Scream has made $37 million domestic, $55 million worldwide in its first week. And this week on weekdays, it's been making over an average of $2 million per day, just during weekdays in the US. So Scream 4 made $38 million domestically in its whole run and only ended up making $97 million worldwide. So why exactly was this successful and not part 4? And one of the reasons why, what you just said, I think part 4 was ahead of its time.
Yeah, I've noticed Scream 4 is getting a lot more love now than it ever did. I remember the general consensus when Scream 4 came out that it was a letdown, it was a disappointment. And I personally never felt that way. I liked it the first time I saw it. I thought it was fucking good the first time I saw it. But watching it a couple of times recently made me think, holy shit, this movie was onto something that was kind of there in 2011 in terms of social media, in terms of filming yourself, in terms of like the character motivation. But in some ways, what's interesting about Scream 4 is that you could take the motives of Scream 4 and the themes of it. If Scream 4 didn't exist and the reboot barely came out now, you could transport the themes directly into this one and it would still feel modern. This taps into something a little bit more specifically niche, I would say. Not as universal, but still very much of the moment in terms of what the killer's motivations are.
And I'm surprised too. I knew that they were going to discuss like elevated horror, but I'm surprised at the way they discussed it without like overly criticizing it or being dismissive of it. I thought it was pretty good commentary.
Well, what I liked about it is that it seems to reflect the current state of horror fandom and the warring factions of horror fans. You have like those camps that hate the A24 horror or what was called elevated horror. And I don't know, that's kind of a ridiculous term, though I understand why it's invented and where it comes from. Because I think of elevated horror as being indebted to like films like The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist. I feel like elevated horror is more indebted to like the horror films that were made by auteurs who were not horror filmmakers that just made these horror classics. Whereas the other camp of horror fans is more into their direct horror, their Wes Cravens, their John Carpenters, or George Romero's. And I like the conversation they have where she talks about what she loves about elevated horror and the depth of it and the themes and the ideas, and Ghostface's like, this fancy pants stuff sounds boring. I was like, that is actually indicative of modern conversations about horror fans. So I think it taps into that really well, the two different sides and the two different views on that specific new evolution of the genre.
And don't you think that these days fans like us are very rare? Ones who love the elevated horror, the A24 horror, but we also love the campy, like really bad movies that are fun.
See,
why can't you like both?
I think that we're more numerous in the horror community than we realize. We're just not as loud.
True.
Negativity rings louder, and people have this thing where they're more likely to express their opinions. And it's a psychological thing. It's true. People are more likely to speak up about something negatively than they are about something positive. Negative memories embed themselves in your brain much more strongly than positive memories do. So it's kind of human nature, but I actually think that there's more of us in the horror community than there is the other two camps. We're just not as loud and in your face and as brash about it.
Yeah, and I think the closer you are to actually the filmmaking community, I think you're more likely to be a more well-rounded fan of all
types
horror.
Yeah.
Rather than just loving certain types.
But it was so weird hearing like The Witch, Hereditary, The Babadook, and all these films being discussed within a Scream film, and I loved it. I mean, it's not like it's the most original thing. Oh my God, they're talking about what's going on, but that's what Scream is. Scream has always been about the current horror trends, the whatever's going on right now, and the Jordan Peele references, the requel monologue, which is hilarious. But yeah, I think it really captures the current state of horror fandom really well. And the two biggest trends in horror, elevated horror and the requels, the soft reboots that we were discussing earlier.
And what I was impressed with is the discussion of so many different types of horror and all the meta discussion, and none of it was shoehorned in, I don't think.
No,
It would all happen naturally.
I keep people hearing saying, oh, all this metatextual stuff. I'm like, yeah, the whole franchise has always been like that, though. That's part of Scream's identity as a slasher franchise, and it's part of what makes it unique or sets it apart from Halloween, from Friday the 13th, from A Nightmare on Elm Street, from Child's Play, is that level of self-awareness. Well, obviously, like the Child's Play franchise and Nightmare on Elm Street each have their entries where they kind of play with the meta elements and stuff like that, with Seed of Chucky or like Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That's never been the bread and butter of the franchise the way that it has been with Scream.
Yeah, and that discussion is actually better in this one than some of the other entries that were done by Kevin Williamson.
Yeah, I have to say, if you didn't tell me, you could have tricked me into thinking that Kevin Williamson wrote this.
Yeah, same.
I felt like I could see similarities. I think where the biggest difference comes in, and one of the things that I kind of liked about it, and I notice a lot of Scream fans are not responding, and I get it. It's slightly different in the sense that I feel like the humor and the horror are both prevalent, very prevalent in this movie. Like it's always been through the franchise, but I feel like they make more of a division between them and more separated, where the horror scenes are less weighed down with, I wouldn't say weighed down because I like that about Scream, but they're less imbued with like the humorous elements, and the humorous elements are a little bit less imbued with the horror. So what you have is the slasher moments play like straight slasher moments, very good ones, very suspenseful ones. And it kind of erases the humor in a lot of those suspense sequences, and it kind of gives it a little bit darker and more atmospheric feel. But I mean, that makes sense. It's a reboot. You got to try to like reconfigure this formula a little bit. So I think of it as still having like the same ingredients as Scream, just arranged in a different way for a new generation. And I kind of appreciated that the horror elements were more horror than they usually are in this franchise.
And neither the horror or the comedy elements felt out of place.
No, not at all.
Nothing. There was nothing in this movie at all for me, and that's all I asked for out of a part 5 in a franchise.
Yeah.
All I ask is you don't take me out of it. Don't make me roll my eyes, and don't take me out of it. And they didn't do that through this whole movie, and I that in itself is impressive to me.
Yeah. So but you did notice, like, the legacy characters took a while to come into play in this one. Like, it really commits to like trying to get the audience to connect with these new characters. And depending on what kind of Scream fan you are, it's either going to work for you, it's probably going to annoy you. Personally, it worked for me because I ended up becoming attached to all of the characters. I ended up really liking the characters and really connecting with them. And I appreciate it that they took the time that, no, we'll get to these legacy characters and the stuff that we know. We all love Sydney and Dewey and Gail, but it takes the time so we really understand this new world and this new cast of characters before bringing it full circle with the originals.
Yeah, these directors knew, and these writers knew that it was okay to be a little patient.
Mm-hmm.
That, like you said, we all know that the legacy characters are coming. Let's lay this foundation first. Let's let people get to know these new young characters, especially if you're going to continue with them through more sequels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wanted to go through the kills. So first of all, the kill counts of the franchise. You got part 1 had 8 kills. Part 2 and 3 both had 10 kills.
That's it? I swear to God, each of these movies feels like they have more than that. Okay.
Yeah. So part 4 has 14 kills. So the most kills out of the whole franchise. So this one takes it back down to 7. But these 7 really count. Yeah, it's actually 8 kills, but the 8th is a security guard off camera.
Huh.
So you got the first kill is Vince. with the screwdriver through the neck. That was a nice kill.
Mm-hmm.
Second kill is one that you feel, Judy.
Oh, we'll get into that after though. But yeah, go on.
So just the way she's tricked and kind of stabbed, but with that one, I was kind of disappointed in Judy because she was made to be much more competent in part 4, where with this one, I know she's in the middle of a very tense situation. Her son's in danger, but why was she off duty and still gone, left him alone when the killer's on the loose? And why did she not have her gun out when she ran toward the door?
Because
that's nitpicking though.
yeah. I mean, adrenaline affects your decision-making process to great degrees, and the greater the adrenaline is, the more your thought process and your decision-making gets jumbled. And that's a pretty intense situation. She was probably in a rush and a hurry, and I knew she was fucking up while she was doing it, and that's what was heartbreaking. I was like, if you could just stand back and like look at what this killer's doing, and he's manipulating you, how he's manipulating you. And I think he did it by going after her weakest spot, her son. That's the part of your brain when you feel like your child's in danger. A lot of your logic starts going out. So I kind of had a feeling, I was like, she's going to fucking walk right into a trap. And what she does, it's fucking heartbreaking, dude. I really was sad with her death. And especially because I became attached to her in Scream 4. I'm watching it again. She's so creepy in Scream 4, but she ends up being kind of lovable in a weird way, and she comes through in the end when she saves Gail. Her death really hit me, and that would have been enough. I was like, why do you have to do 2 deaths like that? Why do you have to fuck with my emotions like that? And I think what made that scene more heartbreaking was her son dying. I was like, please let her son survive this at least, because, I mean, that just feels like, I don't know, it just seems doubly tragic that she couldn't get to her son. And then he got killed too. And that's another thing what I meant earlier. It separates the humor. I didn't feel anything funny about these kills the way they sometimes do in the other Screams. Where I'm not saying they're not tense. They're very fucking tense, but they're always like cut under with some kind of sly humor that makes you like laugh at it. This one feels like, fuck, that just was not cool. There was like no laughter to be wrung from it.
And I understand too why he catches her off guard, because he caught me off guard.
Mm-hmm.
Because it very, very clever little piece of writing where he makes you think that he's in there attacking the son. So all she's thinking is she has to get through that front door, and she's not going to have to confront Ghostface until she gets in there and tries to save her son. But bam, he's on the porch. Clever as hell.
It actually is, because it did, even though I thought she was walking into a trap, it wasn't the trap that I thought she was walking into, because when he was saying he's in the shower, I mean, that means he's in the house. He's going to be in the house if he knows that your son's in the shower. When he does like, ever seen Psycho? And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I knew she was walking into a trap. I wasn't sure it was that kind of trap though. That was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, this whole entire sequence was my favorite sequence of the film, and it led into my favorite kill of the film. Because while she's on the phone in the car with Ghostface is teasing her that he's going to kill her son in the shower. So then he mentions Psycho, and then it shows the exact same shots from Psycho of the boy in the shower.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool, like a little commentary, like adding Psycho into there. So you think that's how he's going to die. But then you see it's all a trap for Judy. So then when Judy gets killed, you think the son is safe because, oh, this was all a trap for Judy, so he's safe. So that's what makes his death that much more effective and makes you feel it more. And then just the nature, the design of the kill, where it's a stab through his face and it comes out his neck. I mean, through his neck and it comes out his face. Oh, it's graphic. You felt it. It looked good. The sequence was filmed well. It was exciting. It was tense. That was my favorite of the whole thing.
I have a hard time picking what was my favorite, but I think that's a pretty damn good candidate for maybe it is the best directed sequence. I don't know. I'd have to watch it again, but I think that's a pretty good candidate for the best directed sequence of this. I mean, you shocked me when I said it's 7 character deaths and 8. I think it makes it seem like there's more because they hit so hard. And also because the opening attack is so brutal. it for all intents and purposes is a kill scene that ends up faking you out, but it still plays like a kill scene even though it's not one.
Yeah, and there's also two other attacks that play out like kill scenes, but the characters survive. So that's another thing where it feels like more kill scenes, but those characters survived as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the next kill I liked a lot too, even though it was pretty abrupt and didn't have any suspense and didn't have anything leading up to it. The Liv kill. She's in the middle of a whole whodunit discussion. Everybody's blaming each other for the kills. All of a sudden, the killer pulls out a gun and shoots her in the head. Like, bam.
That was good because, I mean, a lot of the best kills in horror movies are because the suspense is so built up that you kind of anticipate it. On the other hand, some of the best kills are ones that you come like completely out of nowhere because they jolt you and they shock you into like a more that I'm pretty sure that had the intended effect on me as a viewer. That moment I was watching it, it shocked me into a frenzy. I was like, holy crap, this escalated to something. This went from 0 to 11 like
Yeah.
like it with like within a second, and you feel like your heart race, and then you're just into the adrenaline of the final showdown.
Because it's not just a very abrupt kill, it's also a very abrupt killer reveal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the just the abrupt kill, and then the killer's all of a sudden revealed, and you don't expect that. You expect a little more of a traditional reveal, and it was not.
And that's kind of one of the good things about this is that it upends your expectations at certain points. And I'm like, and you know, when you're in the 5th film of a franchise, you got to start playing around with things. You got to start finding ways to catch the audience off guard, or to like kind of like recalibrate their expectations of what they're watching. And I feel it does a good job of that at several points. One of the reasons I didn't suspect her as a killer, and this was Ria's like, wouldn't it be too obvious to make the Manson girl, the girl who is most known to audiences as the Manson chick who gets burned the fuck up as the killer? And she's the one who, and if you remember Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, she's the one who decides to change the target from the Polanski house to Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton, where Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton's were saying, and she's the one who gets excited and is like, let's cut their fucking balls off, man. And she's like the most overtly psychotic one in that group. So I just thought, I was like, that would be like stunt casting, wouldn't it, to like get this crazy Manson girl and have her be the killer this time around too. And because it's so obvious, I just did not think that was possible. But this franchise does that a lot. It makes killers so obvious that they become unobvious. That is almost too obvious. And then it comes back around. It's like, nope, you were right. You should have followed your instincts in the first place.
Yeah, that's why I think if the killer would have turned out to be anybody else, we could have said the same thing. Oh, that was predictable because they showed this and that. Because they showed something like the football player. They showed the bruises on his arm. Like if he would have ended up being the killer, oh yeah, I remember. They made it obvious. They showed bruises on his arm.
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
so
go on.
So that brings us to the 5th kill, which was Dewey. We talked about that one. He had a great fight with Ghostface in the hospital. And then the 6th one is Richie, the killer. I love his kill because Sam just brutalizes that poor dude. She stabs him several times in the chest, cuts his throat, and shoots him.
I gotta say, it has that those kind of lines that Scream has that are occasionally like simultaneously somewhat cheesy, but like really badass and cool at the same time. Kind of like letting you know what this franchise does, the self-awareness that we know what we're doing, but we're gonna deliver it cool anyway. The moment that she says, I'm introducing a new rule, don't fuck with the serial killer's daughter, and then stabs the fuck out of him, I was like, that was pretty cool. That was a really badass hero moment. And the fact that he was living through all these brutal, vicious fucking stabs, like it's like she made sure that he felt all of it, and he felt a lot of pain. And I was like, yeah, get him, make him feel everything that he put everybody else through, but a lot more intensely, a lot and kind of tenfold. But yeah, I love that moment. So go on with the kills. Yeah,
I was gonna say that's when she reminds me of Sydney as well. Not only the brutality of how she fights back, but also her ability to deliver these silly one-liners and actually make them sound cool. That's something that I thought only Nev could do.
And it was even more brutal than anything Sydney ever did to any of the Ghostface too.
Yeah.
A lot more, and I think there's obviously a reason for that, and we'll get into that after. But go on.
So it brings us to the seventh and final kill, which was Amber. I love when she comes out of the house and tries to play the victim, and she's pretty convincing at playing the victim. But Sydney and Gail were not buying it. I thought that was a pretty fun moment right there. And then
fake out when they kind of looked at each other. What is it? It's a trap. It's a fake out. And they're like, yeah. And then the girl realizes like, fuck, these two are too experienced, and they know they're too hip to the game. They've been through this too many times before.
Yeah, and I love the whole dynamic of Sydney and Gail fighting this petite girl, and then Sam fighting the guy, which is a tougher, stronger killer. I kind of like that whole dynamic because they made the fight with Amber seem realistic because she kept exploiting the injuries of the other two, and that's why she was able to get one up on them.
Yeah.
But the whole smacking her in the head with the hand sanitizer and lighting her on fire, and then she comes back from the dead like every killer does throughout the whole franchise, and then bam, right in the head. So I like that whole sequence.
So are you accounting her as the next death? Okay, so I have a lot to say about that. When they torched her up and she was screaming, I was thinking, oh my god, not only did they do like the thing where I was like, she was the Manson girl in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so she's too obvious to be the killer. They burn her up in the same way, and it's those blood-curdling screams that she does when she's on fire. I was like, I don't know if that's like going to be her niche, because I don't really see that actresses who die in every movie by being burnt alive, and her screaming and her like psychotic behavior, and they like, how's that torch? Because they're talking about passing the torch. He's like, I hope you like the torch. I don't remember if Sydney or Gail says it, but one of them says it, and like, she was torched, literally torched, not just put on fire in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I'm pretty sure that they're like going back to reinforce it. It's like, that's so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And the fact that she comes back screaming, all charred face with a knife, the exact same shot as in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when she's coming at the camera screaming with the knife out. It was. You got that right? I mean, yeah, that was totally what they're doing.
I got that to the point to where, do you think that was a direct, deliberate homage to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I do, just because I think this is such a self-aware franchise and aware of like everything that's going on. And they've referenced Tarantino a few times throughout this series. So yeah, I actually do. I think it's way too obvious for it to not to be. In fact, you can't convince me that it wasn't. Maybe that's just a personal thing and I want to believe it, but it's just too many parallels, too much the same. And the fact that she comes back screaming at the end with a charred face before getting blasted in the exact same way that she does when she screams and runs out the runs to the pool where Leonardo DiCaprio is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood before she gets torched. I had to wonder what that actress is thinking. She's like, damn, am I going to get burned up and scream?
I know.
Screaming in every movie and coming back like that. But yeah, I feel like it was a very intentional homage to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and very specific why it's that actress again.
Yeah, and I see why they picked her too, because man, she plays that part so well.
I believed her for a little bit. She seemed like the overly protective friend for a while that I kind of got the feeling. I was like, oh, maybe she's not. I don't think I was like, it's too obvious, and it seems like she's really trying to protect her from her sister. But of course, a good Ghostface is also a good actor.
Yeah.
Within the context of the social circle. So
exactly.
I think it works, yeah.
So overall, I have a new favorite. I like this one so much, so I have a new order of favorites. My order is 1, 4, 5, 3, 2.
Mine is 1, 2. I have a hard time between picking 4 and 5. I think I'm going to give 5 just a slight edge, only because it felt a little different, if that makes sense. I think it's about as good as Scream 4 is, but I guess I appreciated that, and I wouldn't even say it's better than Scream 4, per se, but it's just that I kind of liked the rearrangement of some of the elements that I was talking about earlier. I liked seeing a Scream movie where the horror and the atmosphere was played a little bit more straight than it usually is in a lot of these movies. And I guess that's just personal preference. That doesn't really mean it's better, but I guess that's why I might give it a slight edge, just because I felt that was a very fresh way to kind of approach the Scream franchise.
Yeah, because it's fresh and different without not even feeling like a Scream film like Part 3.
Yeah.
So so they kept the spirit of the Scream film, but found a way to do something different with it, and plus gave us some compelling characters that you actually like.
I mean, the way I look at it is everybody who's involved is like skilled chefs where they know the recipe, they know what people like, and they know how to put it together, but they know the ingredients, but they decide, you know what? These people have eaten this meal before, so let's rearrange the ingredients a little bit so it's a familiar dish with a kind of new surprise going on. Going with that culinary metaphor. I don't know why I just developed right now.
And also some little clever little integrating the other entries into this one, like all the voice cameos. I don't know if anybody recognized it, but Matthew Lillard plays the voice of Ghostface in Stab 8 in this movie. Drew Barrymore plays the principal. Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, Henry Winkler, and Adam Brody, and both directors and Kevin Williamson all play voices of partygoers in the party scene at the end.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I wasn't aware of that, though.
So I thought that was pretty cool. And then we find out that Patrick Dempsey's character in Scream 3 married Sydney and they had kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we find that out. And I found out that Ned, I love Nev's line where she says, "I'm Sidney Prescott. Of course I have a gun." It was even in the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
But she delivers it so well, and she actually ad-libbed that line. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
But it feels like a Sidney Prescott line at the same time.
Definitely.
I wanted to... Go on.
I was just going to say, Nev was hesitant to be involved in this movie without Wes Craven, but the director sent her a letter outlining exactly how much Craven meant to them and how much his films meant to them. So she not only accepted, now she's on board for any future sequels.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. She says that she's ready and willing and excited to come back for any sequel that pops up. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and we haven't gotten to the big theme of this movie in terms of the killer's motivation, is toxic fandom. This is what I found really interesting. Now, I had to admit, I'm not totally a big Star Wars guy. I like the original trilogy. They're good and everything, but it's not something that I ever could get into like that. Like a lot of people out there have, like, as a thing in pop culture. I like Star Wars, but I don't love it. I was okay with Star Wars: The Force Awakens, and this is all relevant. I never saw The Last Jedi, so I cannot comment on it and give my honest opinion of it. The only thing I'm aware of The Last Jedi, and I know that opinions on that movie are very mixed, but it is a big part of that movie is where a lot of toxic fandom clarified itself and became very apparent. Now, I'm not, again, maybe it is a bad movie. I'm not going to say it's good because I've never seen it, but a lot of the complaints that rose out of it struck me as ridiculous. It was a lot of people that were mad that female characters were pushed to the forefront. I hear the term Mary Sue a lot, which I can't fucking stand that term. And this general anger that it is no longer about the Skywalkers and it's not all like white people anymore. And I saw a lot of like anger and backlash. And I think one of the Asian actresses was actually bullied off of social media because she was getting racist attacks and death threats and stuff like that. So much so that I know that they brought J.J. Abrams back for the third Star Wars. I don't know what it's called. And again, I haven't seen these movies, so I'm not commenting on the movies themselves, to kind of like course correct it, I guess, for fans who were pissed off. So I thought it was a really clever joke that the director of Stab 8 in this movie is Rian Johnson, which is the director of The Last Jedi, which triggers the fandom. And it is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I seen what's on the YouTube screen when they're watching it. It's Ghostface with no sleeves and a metallic mask and a flamethrower instead of a knife. And I guess it's kind of referencing, this is so meta that they're actually making that a Rian Johnson movie in that universe. So it's kind of like playing on the whole Star Wars thing. And I had to admit, I was like, it's kind of exposing our little attachments to our franchises, because when I was watching that scene, I was thinking, well, I think I'd be pretty pissed too if this new Scream movie was about a killer with a metallic mask who walked around with no sleeves and a blowtorch. At the same time, it's just a movie. You don't have to have that kind of possessiveness over it. It doesn't actually ruin your childhood. Those movies still exist. You don't have to get that pissed off that, you know, I mean, I get it. I've been in that position where as a fan, I'm kind of disappointed with like what direction they take the franchise in, but I've never had these meltdowns over it where I was like, no. And that just seems to be a thing in filmmaking today. And I think it's not good for filmmaking. I think like bending into every fucking fanboy demand ruins stuff. And I think my example that's more little more I'm one more plugged into is like the movie Prometheus, which kind of rebooted the Alien franchise but took it in a completely different direction. I liked it a lot, and I liked it because it was doing something different and like exploring new territory, and it's not just another Alien movie, even though it takes place in that universe. It pissed a lot of Alien fans off, not me. So much so that Alien Covenant was a crappy movie that all it did was just fan service. Let's just bring the aliens back. Let's get rid of all that interesting mythology and all that cool new storytelling we built up so we could appease a bunch of fucking fanboys. And I feel like that is becoming a trend that is not good for filmmaking, and it's really shitty. And it gives like audiences and fans like this idea that they're entitled to create these stories. I'm like, no, you're not. You don't own these stories. The people who write and who make them, and you could like them, you could dislike them, but you do not have ownership over them. And if you want to make your own, then go make your own movie then. Like shit. Yeah. If you want to, like, I don't really see how people, I don't understand this desire for fans that they want to see the same thing over again to the point that they don't want to be surprised. They just want to see their same movies remade over and over again, and they get mad when the formula is deviated. And it's become such a trend within the modern, I wouldn't say just it's restricted to the horror community. That's just the film community in general across every genre, and it's pretty prevalent now. And I think the movie had a pretty clever way to kind of address those things and kind of push that to the forefront.
And I thought it was cool also that Scream 5 addresses movies that have and sequels, modern sequels that have fan service in them. And then it has fan service, but it's still original. They deliberately put fan service in there, which is, you know, making kills happen in the exact same location as part one, in the exact same way. But it happens so seamlessly, you almost don't even notice until you really sit there and think about it.
And that brings me to another thing where some people criticize about this movie, and that it not criticize about, that's poor English. Something that one of the things that people are criticizing about this movie online, I get it, but it's kind of baked into what Scream is. It's just another one of those legacy sequels and everything. I'm like, yeah, but Scream is always existing within whatever the horror trend is and commenting on it and giving it to you and parroting it at the same time. The first one is just about slasher movies, horror movies in general. The second one is trying to parody like the tropes of sequels and stuff like that. The third one is attempting to do like the trilogy thing and the tropes of trilogies. So it only makes sense that it within the framework of what a new franchises are, that this would just be Scream. And I think it's very self-aware that the title is Scream and Scream 5. It's a little bit more clever than just calling something Halloween 2018. It's like aware of what it's doing. So it's kind of like baked into what the franchise is. And like people complaining, I'm like, I get that, but I mean, isn't that what Scream is? That's kind of what its thing is. It's supposed to be that. And I think that this does it cleverly enough that it fulfills it, and it kind of smacks those expectations around at the same time.
Yeah, because there's cheesy one-liners because they're supposed to be cheesy one-liners. There's kind of hammy killer reveals because they're supposed to be hammy killer reveals. It's all the nature of this franchise where they can get away with things that other horror films can't, because it's a commentary on those horror films.
Yeah, it is totally, and it also does it in the most meta scene. There's one scene that my brain was turned into a pretzel trying to like comprehend the different layers of what's going on, and it's when Randy's nephew is sitting there watching Stab, saying, "Look behind you." there are like 7 or 8 layers of something going on there. On the
Yeah.
one hand, it's her recreating that scene in the house, in the same exact house, in Stu Macher's house. Where he's like, "Look behind you." She is watching Stab, which is in a movie within a movie, but it's based on the real world Scream, which is what our movie is. So she's watching Stab while we're thinking of Scream. While in Scream, he's watching Halloween and saying, "Look behind you, Jamie," to Jamie Lee Curtis, and the actor's name is also Jamie. And if you want to think about it again, he was being watched on camera by Gail's cameraman and Sydney saying, "Look behind you, kid." There's like 6 or 7 different layers of what's going on right there that it kind of it was funny. I was like, so it's in the same house, the same situation with the niece watching Stab, which is actually just a recreation of Scream, which is our movie and their reality, in which he was watching Halloween and commenting on Jamie while we're commenting on Jamie, and he's being watched and other people are telling him to look behind you. It's just like, this franchise has gotten so many different layers of meta that my brain turned into a pretzel at that moment. It reminded me of that shirt. I don't know if you saw this thing that Ryan Gosling and Macaulay Culkin did. Ryan Gosling wore out a Macaulay Culkin shirt in public and was photographed wearing it. So Macaulay Culkin wore a shirt of Ryan Gosling wearing a Macaulay Culkin shirt. And then Ryan Gosling wore a shirt of Macaulay Culkin wearing Ryan Gosling wearing. This went back and forth 7 or 8 times, like a little joke. Like it just started. That's kind of what this reminded me of. And it's playing with those, but it also does something cool because for the first time, the character is so self-aware and there's been so many different meta layers that she says, "Look behind you," that it occurs to the character to actually look behind her at this point.
Yeah.
And I liked that. I like that it kind of like it does where it's doing that, but then it gives that little twist where she actually looks behind, which is what we've been screaming at the character to do since the first one, in every little layer of what's going on. Really cool stuff.
And it's still great because it's not just the writer and directors planning it to where it would mirror the first one. It's the killer is planning it so it'll mirror the first one. That's what makes it great. That's what makes it acceptable to me.
Yeah. And it feels totally in line with the franchise, but I thought that was one of like the coolest moments in the movie, just because of all the meta layers and all of what's the different layers of what's going on, and the fact that for the first time that the character actually turns around, because the character is too savvy at this point to not be aware of what's going on. So I dug it. I thought stuff like that was pretty cool.
So I think it's pretty obvious at this point, even though we're only a week into the box office, that it keeps growing. So I'm pretty 95% sure that they're going to make another sequel. And I welcome it. Just please keep these writers and directors, please keep Kevin Williamson involved as executive producer, because he overseen everything and he's extremely proud of the final product. So just keep that same formula and keep it going. I'll take more Scream films.
And bring Kirby back. I like Kirby as a character a lot. And I get why they didn't put her in this one. It's because they do want to reboot it and keep it going, and you can't bring out all of your major players at once. You can't lay all your cards out on the table before you even get to the next part of the franchise. So I imagine Hayden Panettiere will probably have a part in the next movie. Will be kind of like the Randy character, the elder millennial, as they called him.
Yeah. And even after 4, even while they were still just before 4 was going to be released, they were already talking with Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson about doing 5 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
So they were already working that out, and then everything got screwed up when 4 didn't have great box office.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it would have been interesting to find out what Wes Craven's second trilogy would have been like. I also found out recently the reason that Scream 4 has a different look from the other 3 Screams, it has like a different lighting style and it's a little bit more smeary at times or like luminescent, is because since Craven was rebooting the franchise with a new trilogy, he wanted to give it a new aesthetic to let the audience know that this wasn't the exact same trilogy as the original. Although it is interesting, this kind of reintroduces the classic slick look of the older films.
Yeah.
And one of the few requels that actually acknowledges the entire franchise.
True.
I think there's this one point in the movie where a character says, oh shit, my like one of their relatives dies in part 3 or part 4. Am I next? And they're like, oh, you don't have to worry about that. They don't really pay attention to the shitty sequels and requels. And I was like, I thought that was like another little joke, but this is one that actually acknowledges the full history of the franchise, so much so that we see the fallout and like, you know, Sheriff Judy Hicks, stuff like that, becoming the sheriff. And I like it. It's one of the few requels that acknowledges the whole franchise and doesn't just, we love the original and fuck all the sequels, although that works for Halloween for me personally because that's how I personally feel. But since I like all the Scream movies, I'm glad that they acknowledge the entirety of it.
And it makes fun of horror tropes, but it also makes fun of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that this is one of the few franchises that's going to be allowed, that fans are going to allow to continue like this, because the trend of Lego sequels is getting old very quick, because it was really shot into the stratosphere when Halloween 2018 became so popular. Mm-hmm. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is coming out with a Lego sequel. Everybody wants to reboot their things in the same way and then call it the same name. So it's going to get really old really quick. But I think Scream is going to be able to continue with it because they address it directly instead of just trying to pull one over on the fans and give them fan service.
Yep. And of course, the toxic fandom. How relevant and timely could you get? And as bad as it sounds and as far-fetched it as occasionally sounds, that okay, so the killers in this movie recreated it because they love the franchise so much that they wanted to give it new source material and bring it back to basics. But I mean, some of the fan behavior is so psychotic, and one particular person I know had such a meltdown over one of the new Star Wars things that they actually committed suicide. I'm not making that up. Somebody
oh my god
over it. So while it may seem a bit extreme or exaggerated that people would reenact like they would like do that they would do this, I'm like, it kind of is, but I mean, it's not really that far off the mark now, is it? I mean, when you have people killing themselves over a goddamn movie not being what you expected it to be, then I don't know that we can call this a huge exaggeration by any means.
Yeah, that takes toxic fandom to a whole new level right there.
Yeah, you killed yourself.
Damn.
So, yeah.
I can't see myself liking any movie that much, too.
No. And what's dumb about it is, like, if you don't like them, you know, the original still exists. They weren't erased from existence. You still have those. And if that's what you really want to go see, then just go watch the original Stab.
Exactly.
Original Scream. It's weird also because I feel like every time they're referring to Stab, they're referring to Scream. And Scream exists in their universe like it's ours. So they have the equivalent to Scream, except it went more off the rails and it's more ridiculous. And that moment in the beginning when they're asking the Stab movie trivia, I heard several people in the audience whisper, Drew Barrymore, because it's a little confusing. They were like, who was the victim? And I was thinking, nope, Heather Graham.
Yeah.
But yeah, good stuff. Highly recommend. I love Scream 2022, Scream 5, whatever the hell you want to call it. I think it's it feels like a Scream film for our new generation, and it's about as good as it could be, considering that Wes Craven's involved. And I gotta say, since that was like one of the only franchises that was consistent with one director, I was always a little bit like iffy about another Scream movie, like a Scream without Wes Craven. But I think they did him. I think they did. They paid good homage to Wes Craven, even having one of the characters named Wes Hicks, so they could that's another meta thing. So they could throw a party where it says for Wes, and they all like cheers and like to Wes to all. And you know, it's weird because they're cheering to Wes, but we as the audience are cheering Wes Craven. Cool stuff. So obviously filled with a lot of love for the franchise, and I think that's what makes it good. It's obviously made by people who are passionate about this franchise and love it and want to do it justice and want to do it well. Want to do it well. Fantastic.
That's why I knew it was going to be at least serviceable, at least pretty good, because it's the directors of Ready or Not, and they came blasting onto the scene with Ready or Not, so they probably could have done any project they wanted to, and this is what they wanted to do because they love Wes Craven so much.
Yeah. So if you're a horror fan, please go check it out. Go support it. It's totally worth seeing. It's worth seeing on a big screen. It's an exciting slasher movie. It's suspenseful. It's violent. It's funny. It's clever. It's self-aware. The characters are engaging. The twist it goes with are pretty surprising. The themes are timely, and it feels very plugged into the current state of horror.
Yeah. So very impressed, and yes, give us more. And everybody stop complaining about reboots and remakes, because studios are putting out what you pay to go see. And you're obviously paying for it in droves.
As the box office of this movie is suggesting, yes.
Yep.
One last thing before we transition out of our Scream review and analysis. One thing that I did want to talk about and I almost forgot was the role of Billy Loomis in this movie and Skeet Ulrich, who you mentioned earlier. So the main character is related to Billy Loomis, is the illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis, and I actually kind of like that. It kind of brings it back and it kind of ties it in. That makes sense that you would have all of this. And there's a lot of relations in this movie. Like one of the victims is is related to Stu Macher. There's different levels of relations to a lot of the classic characters, this being Woodsboro. What did you think about the visions of Billy Loomis in this movie?
It worked for me for the most part, but you know what? They kind of vaguely reminded me of Nev's or Sidney Prescott's dream sequences in part 3 that I didn't like. It vaguely reminded me of that, but much better, definitely.
Much better. And it's where Sam, the lead character, keeps seeing visions of her dead father. And I think it works for the most part, and I even get why she draws on strength from him in the end. Remember what's in her bloodline and what her family, I guess, is capable of doing. And it culminates in that great scene that I mentioned earlier, is like, don't fuck with the serial killer's daughter. So brutal, and I think that's why it's more brutal than anything Neve Campbell ever did. As badass as she was, I don't think I was like, holy crap. And it makes sense because that's Billy Loomis's daughter, so you gotta like up it a little bit. The only thing that I found odd about this is that there's something, and it's not really a retcon because it's not changing anything, but doesn't it seem to me that this makes Billy Loomis somewhat of a heroic character and somewhat redeemable? By the end, when Sam has gone through it all, she sees the vision of her dead dad, and he gives her that wink and that nod, like, I'm proud of you, daughter, you did good, like that. But it just seems so, I literally remember my reaction. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I literally like whispered, what the fuck, at that scene, because it was like, why is Billy Loomis being portrayed as vaguely heroic in this version, the ghost of Billy Loomis? Didn't you find that moment odd?
Yeah, because
it's just odd. It's a weird choice.
Because he's not just an evil killer; he was also a douchebag. Even before you found out that he's a killer, so it doesn't make any sense that he would be helping her. But it is all in her head.
It is all in her head, but it's just that head nod at the end, like, I'm proud of you, daughter, and stuff like that. That gives like a vaguely heroic bent to him. And it kind of recalled, I mean, and it's a lot more justified in The Shining, in the miniseries of The Shining, than it is here. Because it reminded me of that moment on the Shining miniseries, not the Kubrick masterpiece, but the miniseries at the end, when Danny's graduating from like high school or college. I hadn't seen it in a while, I don't remember, but he sees the ghost of his dad, and he's like smiling in the back, and he's like nodding like, I'm proud of you, son. That made sense story-wise for that story, because it was about a man who was a good person and who was fighting demons, and it's supposed to be somewhat tragic because he wasn't a bad person. Reconfiguring that kind of idea for a character who was meant to be a villainous serial killer and the one who basically kicked off all the madness of the Scream franchise seems odd. I wouldn't say it's a bad choice, it's just an odd one, and I don't know what to make of it. That whole Billy Loomis nod, like, I'm proud of you, daughter moment. So weird. I don't know.
What at first it came off as a bit of a good red herring. Like, it kind of made her seem like the killer because she was seeing visions of her killer dad. So that was kind of cool about it.
Yeah, but I just had to address that because it was an interesting choice to have Billy Loomis and Skeet Ulrich come back, though some of the moments struck me as strange. Not bad, just strange, just unusual choices that kind of surprised me. And that's all I have to say about it. Love the movie. I just thought that was an odd choice to make him vaguely heroic this time around.
I didn't think it was overkill, though. I think they use it, like, if they would have done it more, maybe it would have affected the the movie, the effectiveness of the movie, but I think they used it
Yeah.
just enough to where it was kind of getting iffy, and then
Yeah.
it's done.
That's why I said vaguely heroic. I don't think they just turned him into a hero, but there's just something where you're supposed to like smile at that moment and think, yeah, good Billy, good for you, Billy, and good for your daughter. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's all. Anyways, that's our review of Scream 5. So much for the gushing and the love fest we had going on. We're about to get into our Horror Tubi Roulette segment, which we haven't done since last year. It's our segment that we love to do where we go through the Tubi app. And for those who don't know, Tubi is a free app. It just comes with ads. They're not very intrusive. I always say this. They're pretty brief. And it's loaded with different films. So what we like to do is we like to log on to the Tubi app, go to the horror section, and scroll while not looking until we land on something. And whatever it is, good, bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly, we have to watch it, come back to you at some point, review it. We don't do it right away. We usually take our time. So it's been a few months. I think it was since Malignant came out, which is when we last did Horror Tubi Roulette. And we're here. We're back to review the films that we saw. And I don't think what we saw was very pretty.
No, I think we both lost this round of Horror Tubi Roulette because we both got some bad movies. So which one of us should go first?
It's the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we got the bad and the ugly this time.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go first. It was a movie. The movie that I landed on last time was No Vacancy. From 2012. It was a little bit confusing and a little bit hard for me to find because it actually goes under two different titles, and one of them is The Helpers. It's about a group of friends that are heading to Las Vegas on a trip who break down and have to seek out help, hence The Helpers. Where they have to seek out help from people who own this gas station and this cheap little motel. So the guys go and they walk off to go get help and leave the girls there. And they come back and they pick up the car and they let them stay there for the night. And there's porn stars there and the guys are partying and getting laid. And then they wake up and they found out that they were drugged and these characters want to play games with them, the people who were nice, who were helping them. And the entire motive is because, why are you doing this to us? Because you asked for help. Because we grew up in an orphanage and every time we asked for help, we got beat. And this is our way. And the motivation is so fucking stupid and laughable that I was like, my eyes were rolling. My eyes literally rolled to the back of my skull and fell out my asshole when I heard the motivation. But it's dumb, dude. It's so dumb, and it has like those. And I'm pretty sure you kind of could get the feeling when I'm talking about the type of characters that, ooh, we're bad, and the girls who are like these porn stars, like, ooh, we're torturing you, we're bad. Don't talk back to me, ooh. Such annoying villains. And I wanted to kill them all myself. And I have this thing where, like, I understand characters making bad decisions when there's adrenaline going on, so I can get that in horror movies. But this is just flagrantly stupid decision making. What the fuck is wrong with these people? There's a point where a couple actually gets away from these killers and goes back. They escape. And they go back and they get themselves killed, and it's just so dumb. Like the level of bad decision making is just so off the charts as to be like astronomically stupid. I just could not believe some of the decisions these characters were making. And I think what makes it worse is it's not really that badly made, I would say. I think considering such a small film with such a limited budget, there seems to be some creativity in some of the filmmaking, considering on a budget, and some interesting shots. I mean, one particular shot that I did like is when a character gets their head lopped off, and it comes out of nowhere. It is, I'll admit, that scene's a little bit shocking. And the two people who are watching their friend with their head lopped off, the camera goes into this like weird mode where they're like seeing double or seeing two. And I thought it really captured very well in that moment how disoriented you would feel to be just talking to a friend casually and then just see an axe just come in and just lop their head off, and how disorienting. So it has little bits and moments like that, but the characters and the motivations are so fucking stupid that it just is hard to even care. And the villains are ridiculous and annoying and irritating. And then it becomes even more convoluted, where, as if the motivation wasn't bad enough, we're orphans and shit. It goes into this really convoluted thing that really is so far-fetched that it just stretches believability. That one of the guys there whose girlfriend didn't come, she had originally planned the trip and didn't back out, and she was part of it the whole time because one of the girls who was there was the dad who ran the orphanage where they were abused and beaten, and they're getting revenge on all of them and the daughter, and it's silliness, dude. It's nonsense. It's dumb. There's no other way to put it. It's just the script leaves so much to be desired. The motivations are totally ridiculous, and the villains are laughable, and the decision making is so poor that it just had me smacking my head like, I cannot believe they are actually doing this. Get the fuck out of here. It wasn't good. That's just what it comes down to. It was just a bad movie. And it's not bad in a campy way or a funny way in the way that some movies are bad. This is just straight bad. And it's too bad because there was some potential here. I guess you could have made something better out of it. And what we have is just, it's not good.
So decent production value, a couple good moments, but that it just makes it painfully aware how bad it is, the rest of it.
Yeah, and not in a campy way, in an obnoxious way. I guess there's one other moment that was satisfying when one of the victims got something and actually tricked one of the killers, one of the dumb porn star killers, and electrocuted her. That was a satisfying moment, but it's only a couple, like a moment here, a moment there, spread out through a bunch of nonsense, unlikable characters, ridiculous scenarios, poor motivations, and bad plotting.
Okay. So you lost your round of Tubi Roulette this week, like I did. So mine, the one I chose, was OUIJAGEIST from 2018. It's just as stupid as it sounds. As soon as I seen that I landed on OUIJAGEIST, I was like, "Oh Lord gracious!" And it was the right reaction. This was so bad. It's directed by John R. Walker. He's a C-movie actor turned director. He directed Amityville Playhouse and 5G Zombies.
Mm-hmm.
I can just imagine how those are. The writers are Daryl Buxton. Daryl, he's a first-time writer on this one. He went on to co-write 5G Zombies. The other writer is Steve Harvey. He wrote Amityville Playhouse and co-wrote 5G Zombies. So these guys are just cranking out really bad movies. This one, OUIJAGEIST, is about it's a British film about a single mom who moves into a new place and finds a Ouija board in the garden. Soon after, everyone starts dying around her. Mm-hmm. So it opens kind of nonsensically with a dude running, and there's retro Stranger Things music playing. This sounds really derivative. And then he puts his hands on some dead dude and runs away. And then the next thing you know, some guy's stalking him and attacks him, yelling some annoying gibberish. And then the title comes up. Like, I don't know what it has to do with the rest of the movie or anything. I don't know what was going on in that scene. But anyway, you can see pretty much right away, the score gets extra cheesy in the creepy parts because it's already cheesy and kind of melodramatic and very amateur. Mm-hmm. But in the creepy parts, it really gets bad. It goes all over the place, from bad retro Stranger Things knockoff music to piano music to annoying filler with strings. It just completely disjointed and distracting as hell score. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, on every dialogue scene, there's scene after scene of heavy dialogue, but there's piano music playing in the background, and it's already mundane, wordy conversation, and then this piano music gets louder and louder, and you can't hear what they're saying, and it makes everything that's going on even harder to follow. Mm-hmm. So it's just a bunch of nonsensical, very wordy scenes one after another. So the main girl gets a job at a pet store, and you spend a lot of time in the pet store, her talking to her boss, but I never knew what they were talking about. Didn't know why these scenes were important. It kind of just there as filler. And then the score invades the movie again with this very intrusive synth followed by piano music. It just sounds completely off. It's just several points where the score makes this movie even worse than it already is. So I think that there's this one part where the girl falls down, the woman falls down the stairs,
Okay.
I think that the child gate on the stairs, I think that she gets pushed by the ghost over this gate and falls down the stairs, but you can't tell. You can't even tell that she's falling down the stairs. It's really poorly filmed fake out where she's supposed to be falling down the stairs, but you can't really tell at all. So then it gets to one of the most cringy scenes in the whole movie. You see the girl's little baby, and then you see the baby throughout the film, and then like 30 minutes in, you find out that she's the mom. It doesn't even indicate that she's the mom. So you got the grandmother downstairs, the mom is upstairs in her room, and she's running a bath in the bathroom. So you see the baby go up to the Ouija board, kind of opens the little box, and you hear whispers from the Ouija board, like it's whispering something to the baby. The baby then crawls all the way up the stairs, goes toward the bathroom, and you can hear the bathtub running inside the bathroom. So, oh shit, the baby's headed toward running water. So then the mom comes up one side, comes up the stairs. I mean, the grandmother comes from one side, the mom comes from the other, and then the bathroom door slams and leaves the baby inside. They bang on the door, they can't open it. So then they finally open the door and they stand there looking shocked. End scene. Very next scene, they're at a funeral. Holy shit, the baby died. Her baby got killed. What the hell? It drowned. And then there's a commercial break. After the commercial break, she comes back home and she has the baby in her hands. And they talk about that funeral being a funeral for her friend that died. So they go through this whole scenario, making you think the baby died. And then in the scene after the funeral, you find out the baby's alive and that was her friend's funeral. So what did they show? Why did they even show the baby scene?
It sounds redundant.
Oh, it was ridiculous. So then right after that scene, there's another place. There's a knock on the door. The girl walks out. They show a wide angle lens of her looking around. There's nothing within any close vicinity to her house. You see nothing. All of a sudden it shows a close-up of her face. A clearly stuffed head of a dog hits her in the face and bounces off her face. You can almost see the stuffing come out. It like bounces off her face, so you can totally tell it's a stuffed dog head. And then this lame side story comes in about some guy stalking her. That comes out of nowhere, but it leads to a pretty cool little scene. He kind of stalks her into a coffee shop. So they're sitting there talking about him being stalkery, and then they come to an understanding, like he's the baby daddy. That's where we find out that he's the baby daddy. And they come to an understanding where he's going to start coming around the kid again. And then suddenly he gets a big gulp of hot coffee and he starts growling and spitting it at her. So I thought it was ridiculous, but I thought it was kind of cool. Just because everything around it was so lame. I thought that was kind of cool.
Everything about what you're saying sounds like the type of thing that I would have expected from a movie titled OUIJAGEIST.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the lighting, by the way, you said the production value was decent on yours. Not this one. It was bad lighting. It looked really flat throughout. It was very noticeably digital video. And it even started out in the woods when that guy was being chased at the beginning. A few creative shots, a few good pickup shots of close-ups in the woods, and made me think it was going to be a decent movie. But no, it just fell apart after that and never quite recovered. Mm-hmm. But there's this one other funny scene. The girl's at her house, right? Mm-hmm. This dude shows up out of nowhere. He's going to wash the windows. So he's out about to wash the windows. He looks in his bucket, and there's a sponge inside his bucket. He turns his head, turns back, and the sponge is out of the bucket, and it's inside the house. So he goes inside to get it. So while he's inside getting his sponge out of the house, the hose comes out like a snake and wraps around the little stepladder. He has a stepladder that's no more than 2 feet off the ground. A little small stepladder that you unfold and set on the ground. He steps up on the stepladder. He starts wiping off this awning. Keep in mind, he's 2 feet off the ground. He starts wiping off the awning. The hose pulls the stepladder out from under him. Next scene, he's laying flat of his back and blood pouring out of his head.
It sounds pretty silly.
Oh man, I told
You at
myself
least laugh
I
at
wasn't
this?
gonna laugh.
Was there at least campy fun? I mean, the way that you're recounting it, you sound like there was at least some sort of level of campiness or campy enjoyment to it.
Well, I'm laughing at it just because how stupid and absurd it is. It's not even like a fun movie at all. It's
So,
overly serious.
so is it more fun to like recap it and explain the ridiculousness than it is to actually watch it?
Yes, yes. And I'm actually trying not to laugh when I recount it because I I just can't help it. Um, anyway, it comes up the next scene you see is a priest comes to the house to see what's going on because they start to suspect that it's some kind of ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So inexplicably, he just finds this giant eye looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's never explained what it is. He picks it up, he throws it into the sink, and then it starts growing. And this is another kind of cool part where the thing grows and grows, pulsates, and then blows up in his face. And when it blows up in his face, he starts screaming, and then all kinds of satanic images start popping into his head. So it's little moments like they know how to make a decent movie. They're just not doing.
Yeah.
So then that priest leaves. So they bring his boss in. And they bring his boss in, and I thought the other scenes were wordy and too much dialogue, but the exposition dump from this priest, dude, he rambles on and on for a good 5 minutes. Just constant exposition. Is complete with that loud score where you can barely hear anything he's saying. It's maddening because you're catching every other word and you kind of get what he's saying, and you can see that it's all exposition, and then this loud ass piano music in the background, and then it's kind of funny. The priest starts talking about The Exorcist, the movie. And he said, no, now don't think this is like The Exorcist because they got it wildly wrong. And then the priest turns around and he gets scared because the chairs are stacked up in the kitchen. They're stacked up on the table. But she said, oh, sorry, I was just cleaning and I stacked them up on the table. So it was a really lame nod to other horror films like Poltergeist and The Exorcist. And then I thought it was nonsensical up to this point. Dude, right after that big exposition dump, right after you see the priest talks about The Exorcist and all that, the very next scene, there's some random cop is turned into a zombie. So what movie is this? Who are these people? And he starts attacking people. And the next scene, you see the girl, the main character is back at home. Next scene is this almost kind of scary girl appears, and she's obviously a ghost, and then she runs at her and attacks her like a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
But then she runs after her and she disappears. So it's things like, are they zombies? Are they physically attacking? Are they ghosts?
Mm-hmm.
Why did they show the cop? I have no idea. So then the girl breaks the Ouija board and then inexplicably goes into a graveyard. I don't know if she was visiting her friend's grave. They didn't say why. They just figured it's the climax. Let's take the main character into a graveyard. So the ending credits score starts swelling already before the end of it. So she's in the graveyard. She breaks the Ouija board, and then you hear the end credit music start playing, and she finds the Ouija board intact again on top of one of the graves. The score gets louder and louder, and then I think she's attacked, but I don't know. It's kind of jumbled, and you can't tell whether she's attacked or not. And then that scene cuts, and it's a cheesy news story comes on and says that this girl is missing. The end. So bad. But you mentioned commercial breaks, how the commercial breaks aren't bad. I actually kept up with them this time. This movie was about an hour and a half, 4 commercial breaks. Not too bad. First commercial break was 5 15-second commercials. Second commercial break was 3 commercials. Third one was 2 commercials. So they take them from 5 down to 3, down to 2, which I thought was pretty cool. It makes them seem less invasive. But then the last set of the fourth set of commercials is 5 commercials, and 2 of them are 30 seconds long. So it's a fairly long set of commercials right toward the end, but it ends up being about 5 full minutes of commercials, which isn't that bad. It isn't nearly as bad as when you watch an edited movie on TV. So that's my experience with another terrible movie that made me lose this round of Horror Tubi Roulette this week.
Oh, I apologize. The reason there was silence there is because I put my screen on mute for 1 second. We're about to play another round right now. Let's see if we're going to win or lose this time. So I'm going to do what I did last time. I noticed I did this last time on the podcast when I listened to it back. I let you pick when to stop. So I'll just tell you when I start and you just tell me when to stop. Okay? And I'm going now.
And stop.
Hall from 2021. Oh, cool. This kind of helps me build up my 2021 list. When a mysterious virus rips through the hallway of a hotel, COVID, a group of scattered guests are forced to fight through the carnage to make their escape. The Hall. Add to my list. Cool.
Doesn't sound too bad.
No, not too bad. Should be interesting. We'll see how that goes.
All right, I'm going to get started now. So I'm now scrolling. So tell me when to stop.
Now.
Okay, mine is Famously Haunted, Amityville. So Famously Haunted Amityville. It's
Another Amityville. There's like 50 million of those things.
Well, this one's actually a documentary. It's a 2-hour special, goes deep into one of the most exploited true crimes in history, the mass family murder of the DeFeo family.
Interesting.
This should be interesting.
Yeah. Well,
so I got a documentary this week.
Cool.
Oh, it's a Tubi original. Haven't seen one of those before.
They make original movies now? I mean,
guess so.
It kind of makes sense. It was only a matter of time before they started to. It was only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so The Hall. And what's it called again?
Mine is Famously Haunted, Amityville.
What year is it?
It is 2021.
Oh. What were the chances that we both
I
would
know.
end up on something so new? Cool. So we'll eventually review those movies at some point and play another round of Horror Tubi Roulette. Please keep following us. We are on our rebooted Instagram. What is it again? At Horror Show Pictures?
At The Horror Show Pictures.
At The Horror Show Pictures. Follow us on TikTok if you're a Gen Zer or anybody else. I'm just kidding. Or as they say in Scream. What did he say in the new Scream? Hello, Gen Z, or when he was addressing it was funny. So it's at Horror Show Official, and there you'll get clips of all of our greatest hits, different interviews, different people we've had on the podcast, little bits of conversations that we've had before. And if you want to just follow with everything that we do, whether it's the film productions that we work on, the scripts we're working on, the things that we're putting into production, the things that we're trying to get into post-production, follow us on Facebook. Facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show, and that's probably where you would get the most, I would say, most comprehensive updates on what we're up to, as well as other little fun stuff and facts and memes and interesting stuff in there as well.
Yeah, we've been trying something different with our social media that our fans might find interesting, where a different member of our team runs each social media platform. Where you James, you run the TikTok platform. I run the Facebook platform, and then my son Darian Pickle runs the Instagram platform. Mm-hmm. So I also plan on getting on Twitter more. So I'll be handling Twitter with a bunch of my thoughts and a bunch of thoughts from the team and stuff like that. So look out for that.
So keep up with us. Till next week, folks.
Happy horror.